I think there's different models that you have to look at. So if you're vertically integrated, you don't necessarily need to be high volume to make a business sustainable. There's a lot of apartment owners who only own a small collection of apartments, so there could be vertically integrated co-living owner operators that are small. When you look at the management model, you need a lot of scale in that business. It's a lower margin, higher volume business model, and so there will definitely need to be consolidation in that sector, whether people are merging, buying out, or just certain people are just going for a real expansion on that. But because you do need scale in that model, so I think that's going to happen. And we talked a little bit about the lease model, and that's really getting tested in these times. And so there might be opportunities where some of those leases get undone, and then what happens with them, and what's the opportunity there to rethink probably a more sustainable management capital structure on some of those buildings.
Christine here with another weekly episode of the Co-Living Code Show. I'm your host. I am also the co-founder of Kindred, which is software for the co-living industry. And first, before we get started, we have a new partner of the show, which is Anyplace. They're a new kind of rental listing platform, the only one that actually focuses on longer term stays to help property managers, operators, and owners maintain filled rooms that provide consistent monthly income. And it couldn't be easier to get started on their platform. They own the entire booking process from A to Z, from tenant screenings to customer support to payment collection. And no other rental platform offers a complete booking solution for 30 plus day stays. And all you need to do on your end is approve the bookings and get paid. Their goal is to connect great rental properties with great tenants. And how they do that is what makes them different from any other listing platform for rentals. So definitely check out anyplace.com. And again, we appreciate their partnership for our show. And speaking of our show, I am super excited to bring on Anil with Node Living. We met up about a year ago over at Zoku in Amsterdam. We sat down. We ended up talking for 2 hours before recording the show. Ran out of time. My biggest regret is not just hitting record on my cell phone, because we had an amazing conversation. But again, on this episode this week, we still had an incredible conversation. We got to talk about how they're handling COVID. It's super impressive about Anil and what he's built with Node. Owns, develops, and manages the co-living. And they are already in the US, UK, Canada, and Ireland in just the last 4 years, which is really cool. So I'll go ahead and read his bio real quickly, and then we'll launch into this week's episode with him. Anil is the founder and CEO of Node, a global vertically integrated company that owns, develops, and manages co-living, micro-living, and furnished apartment residences in key gateway cities in North America and Europe. Node prides itself on creating beautifully designed residences in great neighborhoods that foster a community of global-minded creatives, entrepreneurs, and professionals that thrive on connection and who embrace diversity. Anil considers himself a global citizen, being of Indian descent, born and raised in Canada, and currently resides in the UK. Anil started Node in 2016 by acquiring and redeveloping residential buildings in the US, UK, Canada, and Ireland with largely his own capital, and is the company's primary shareholder. He manages a global team across London, Toronto, and LA, and is responsible for the overall management, investment activities, and expansion of Node globally, and splits his time between London and Toronto. Anil has worked in real estate for nearly 20 years in the US, Europe, and Asia, including 11 years at Blackstone, the world's largest private equity real estate firm with over $100 billion of assets under management. As a managing director at Blackstone in London, Anil was involved in over $30 billion of real estate transactions. Anil created Blackstone's European Real Estate Capital Markets Group, was involved in creating its Indian real estate team, and helped create and successfully sell Nido Student Living, a $700 million, 2,500 bed student housing company. Prior to Blackstone, Anil lived in Los Angeles and worked on the investment team of DLJ Real Estate Capital Partners, the private equity real estate arm of Credit Suisse. Anil graduated with an HBA from the Ivy School of Business at Western University and a BA from the University of Waterloo in Canada. He has been listed in Properties Week's Hot 100 and Top 40 Under 40. Anil also serves as chair of The Lighthouse, a unique project to develop a church-based community center in London. See, he has a very impressive background and he's doing very impressive things. So now you know I am so excited to finally bring Anil on the show. Oh, yeah. And one last thing, we're still doing our weekly COVID and co living forum every Wednesday. We have anywhere roughly about 10, 15 operators from around the world come on video, talk about co living, talk about their journey and how they're handling things. We'd love for you guys to join us. Just shoot our team an email and we will get you those details. So won't waste any more time. Let's go ahead and launch into this amazing interview with Anil, founder, CEO of Node Living. Okay, so this week we have Anil with Node Living. They're global. We've been trying to get him on the show for so long. What's so funny is we met for the first time in Amsterdam in person, what was that, June or July last year? And we were supposed to do it then. And me and Anil started talking for like 2 hours about the industry. I mean, I swear we should have hit record. So welcome to the show this week, Anil.
Great. Thanks, Francine. Really glad to be on finally. And just love what you're doing and love how this community globally is coming together through the Co-Living Show, especially at this time when it's great to connect and share ideas. So really happy to be here.
Awesome. So I know you have an investment banking background, Blackstone, very impressive. So let's back all the way up to when you decided to get into real estate and co-living.
So backing all the way up, right? I've always been a bit of a closet architect. I designed buildings and floor plans when I was a kid, my parents' kitchen renovation. So I've always had the real estate bug. I had a career in real estate private equity for about 15 years. And while I was there, we built a student housing business called Node Coliving and successfully sold that. I was in charge of all various aspects of that. And it was my first insight into what I would say is the next generation of urban living. And it was very clear that the student sector was starting to get savvy with how people were needing a community, wanting to connect, wanted to live in urban spaces, wanted all inclusive. But it felt that the multifamily model was still like in the dark ages. And so that combined with just a personal experience of moving from Canada and Toronto to LA, then to London, then a stint in India and back, and just seeing that experience that so many of us have gone through of just a lackluster experience of moving into cities, getting acquainted, meeting people, connecting. And there's just got to be a better way. And so when I launched Node 4 years ago, the whole idea was to look at this as a global solution that we can be part of, but also sort of an industry changing opportunity to really bring the living sector, which, we've got 10 billion people on the planet, 7 billion can live in cities, bring that into the 21st century in a way that just tackles loneliness, depression, the housing crisis, affordability, the list goes on, but also do it in inspiring spaces and with inspiring people. So that's really what it's all about and how the journey's been.
Love that. And you're the epitome of the global, not even traveler, but you relocate to these major gateway cities around the world. I know you and your family split your time up still from Toronto to London, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And are you in London right now during COVID?
Yeah, I'm in London right now, and then in sort of virtual lockdown, hoping to go back to Canada next month, and we bounce back and forth. It helps, just stay connected with what's happening around the globe, right? Being in both sides of the pond, every other month has been great. Look, we're part of one global community and humanity. So it's great to stay connected physically, and now with Zoom and technology, virtually more and more.
Yeah, and I know you've kind of said, the global citizen, that's who you guys are kind of going after. Name the cities that you guys are, because you're in so many now. Can you name all of them?
Yeah, sure. London, Manchester, Dublin, Kitchener-Waterloo, which is a city right by Toronto in Canada, New York and Brooklyn, LA, and Seattle coming up soon.
Woo! Impressive. Yeah, you guys, and again, so let's talk about this next. You guys are vertically integrated. So you guys are, managing, you guys own the building, operating it, and so forth. So, is that a decision you guys made from day one, obviously?
Yes. Look, if you think about the housing industry, most student housing businesses are owner, operator, develop, right? And over time, people might do one of each of those, but really they're vertically integrated businesses. Most multifamily companies are also vertically integrated like that. And so this movement of co-living sitting in between those two sectors, it makes sense that a large portion of the players in this market are going to be vertically integrated. You can create your own environment better. You can control your physical environment. The capitalization of buildings on an ownership model is more sustainable long term. And by owning the buildings and managing them and developing them and operating them, there's a really great feedback loop you get. So my ops team is always telling my development team, what's working, what's not working, what should we do next time, how can we learn from this, and how do we get better? What things are durable? What works really in real life that helps foster community or not? And so that learning loop of having it is really, really helpful in the model. And it's frankly the most proven model in the housing sector. It's the hardest to get into. It's capital intensive. There's lots of reasons why a lot of people can't do it, but it's proven over time to be probably one of the most sustainable models you can do.
No, love that. And obviously you've used a lot of your own capital. Are you still like the largest shareholder yourself in the company?
Yeah, so we've got over a dozen buildings and, across these different markets, yes, that's true. As we grow, we're going to be looking for strategic partnerships with investors, whether they're developers, institutional investors, private equity type investors, to scale to the next level. And so while we're the majority owner in what I'd call the Node 1.0 portfolio where we started, as we grow and look to increase our balance sheet, we really want to bring best-in-class partners and take the learning experiences we had from the first ones. We got some things right, we got some things wrong, more right than wrong, which is why I'm here. But we want to take that into larger, more scalable institutional opportunities and really be one of the market participants that helps institutionalize this whole sector.
And I mean, you guys are so lucky because the thing I'm hearing the most from operators around the world is just their regret. And a lot of them had to do it, right? They had to start with master lease to prove the model. But right now, some of those are really hurting, in the sense that they don't own the building. So they're dealing with the landlord. At first, two questions. How many beds do you guys have total right now?
Just under 400.
400, awesome. And then how did you guys weather COVID? How maybe occupancy rates, did those decrease, rent, delinquency on rents or anything?
Yeah, we've had a really interesting experience during COVID. First of all, our collection rates have been like almost 100%. So that's really speaks to the quality of our residents, who are very high quality, care about the credit score. But also in terms of vacancy, it's varied market by market. But, I think May was a trickier month if you had some vacancy because people couldn't do tours. But what we're seeing is that really picking up and rebounding pretty quickly. And so if you've got a price point and you've got a differentiated offering, the community, beautiful design, great neighborhoods, that's just showing its resilience in this sort of market where, everyone might have been doing well when everything was rah, but now when people have a lot more choices, it's sort of quality that really comes through.
Definitely. And, Tara's great. So in Los Angeles, I've got to see one of your guys' properties in Echo Park. Beautiful, right? They were bungalows. It's super cute. And so talk about some of the design features inside, because again, I know you guys went a little higher end, you guys are looking for a certain clientele, the business professional. So yeah, if you could talk about that a little bit.
So in each building, from a design perspective, we look at the heritage of the area and the history of a neighborhood. We also look at, if we're doing an existing building or a rebuild, what the architectural styles we want to embrace for that area. So in different cities, in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, for example, we want to embrace that Brooklyn brownstone, right? That has just so much character and history, because when people go there, that's the essence of what is there. And so why wouldn't we take our node concept and overlay it into a beautiful century brownstone? Then looking at LA, there were 350 bungalow courts left that were designed over 100 years ago as the first kind of concept of community living, mini houses around a communal outdoor courtyard, which kind of became a communal space for residences. And we just thought it would be amazing to actually restore these, bring them back into the 21st century and kind of reimagine that community life that people thought about 100 years ago, but now for this live, work, tech-enabled, entrepreneurial or creative type worker. And so that's been really great. And then, for example, in places like Dublin, we're in a historical Georgian terrace that was built 300 years ago. And so bringing that historical character into our building has been great, because that's what you're going to Old Europe for. And so why wouldn't we do something that really embraces that? So from a design perspective, we don't have a a fixed design where everything's cookie cutter. We want to bring variety, and we want to bring out the best in the cities and the neighborhoods and the historical architecture that each of these areas had to offer.
That is super cool. No, you guys nailed it on the one I saw. And when you guys are talking about Dublin, and to this day, and I know me and you talked about it before, like, I don't know why, like, co-living in Dublin is like still to this day, it's like so much pushback. So maybe you can talk about that, you know, when you guys started over there.
Yeah, well, look, the pushback in co-living in Dublin has been really about micro units and people being afraid of really, really small units in buildings. And so nobody's disagreeing with an all-inclusive solution. Nobody's disagreeing with a community where people actually know their neighbor, do things together, both organically and in an organized fashion. And so many of those great things that the co-living movement's been about, they've embraced. And where the negativity has come is where people have gone probably too small on individual bed sizes, and there's a question of whether that's a sustainable model. What we did in Dublin was actually embrace the apartment model, and what we do in a lot of our projects are, our co-living concept usually doesn't go more than a 4-bed or a 3-bed, 3-bath unit. So traditional apartments where you still have your own cooking, cleaning area, you're sharing with 2 or 3 other roommates. And so because we did that in that way, people really embraced that and didn't necessarily find the same issue with it, because they said, oh, that's great. Like, I have your kitchen, you have it. The room sizes are nice. It works. We might be smaller than a traditional large apartment, and landlords in Dublin aren't necessarily matching roommates and thinking about curating a community. But we found there's a nice balance that can be done there. And I think the dorms for adults model has really been under question there, where some developers have gone too small, making the numbers look really good on the spreadsheet, but the living conditions in reality are a bit scary. And I think that's what a lot of the controversy in Dublin, frankly, in London, there's a similar story there as well.
No, that makes sense. And again, like, what's your average, like, your age range of residents?
Yeah. So our average age is about 28 years old. We've got people like early 20s, well to 40. 35% of our residents are over 30. 60% are female. And, from in terms of like industries, they're all creative souls. So whether they work in tech, media, we had a biotech CEO, startup person. We've had someone who's just been involved in launching a best-selling Netflix film. So they've come from all sorts of really creative walks of life, but that's the demographic that we have. And so our concept is a little bit like an aspirational luxury lifestyle, but at an affordable price.
In such amazing cities, again, that you guys have already chosen. And do you guys have residents yet? And I know that's the future plan of Node, but have you guys had residents already jump between properties in the different cities?
We've had a few people ask to do that. And so as they're sort of ready to make that transition, we definitely think that's going to happen more and more in the future, especially as people are starting to make these career decisions of moving from, the East Coast to the West Coast or across the pond. And so I think as we grow our platform, we're going to see more of that. What we'd love to also do in the future is offer all our nodies an opportunity to kind of hop around within the Node network to other properties, so that if we have a vacancy available for a week or a weekend, nodies could probably go there for a discounted price, and because we know them and they're part of the community, we can keep them all. And so that in the future will definitely be something that we will strive to be able to offer to people.
That's awesome. And then what's your average lease term?
We mostly, our average length of stay is about a year. But we're really targeting people to be there, anywhere from, 9 months to 2 years. So we have minimum 6 months stay in most cases. So this is meant to be your home. And so we need to make sure that the units have sufficient size to give you what you need, so that, if residents want to stay for 4 years, they don't feel that they're running out of space to put their stuff or live in. So we definitely want to make sure these are sustainable for the long term.
Oh yeah. No, the one I saw, the bungalow was adorable. I could totally live there for years, for sure. Yeah. And then I don't know if you guys have like a creative team or branding agency, but I just love like some of the sayings you guys come with, the taglines, like live local, be global. Maybe you're saying, coming up with these, live, connect, thrive, that's like the essence of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, thanks. But that is what it is. Like the word node, I'll tell you a little story, actually. It wasn't a fancy branding agency. actually, we were at the dinner table, and I was talking to my wife and her family about, like, what do we call this? Like, we want to connect people, we want to be next gen, we want to be fun. And the whole idea of being a connecting point really resonated with us. Like, you think about a dot on a map and how cities connect and people connect. And just out of that conversation, they were like, what about Node? And I was like, what about Node? Like, it just sort of stuck, and we've never gone back from there. So, a lot of times these things just come organically, and that makes it more fun. It's true to the heart, but no fancy branding agency on that one.
Love that. Okay, I got it. That makes sense. And then what's like your minute? And again, it's probably location specific, but like, what are they making annually? Like your typical resident?
Oh, in terms of income?
Yeah, income.
Yeah, our median income, it varies by a couple of the cities, but I would say the median is about 70 to 80K. Now, we still have 25% of people who make under 40K. So we've got an entry level where you can come in straight out of school on your first internship job. That means maybe you're co-living in a 3 or 4 bed arrangement. But we also have 23% of our residents make 6 figures. And, there's some people who make 200,000-300,000 a year, and you say, why would they be there? Well, some of them like the idea of they don't need a lot of space. They would love a beautiful curated place to live in, but it's the environment and the type of people that we have in the building that's really drawing them all together to live. And so, yes, we're doing a plug and play solution. But also it's the vibe, it's the ethos, it's just having all these really interesting people together. And so, it's a varied income stream. What we want to do is make sure that, our initial nodees who come in, let's say straight at the start of their career, we can have a product and a price point for them. But as they progress in their career and earn more money or have a successful business or venture, we've got a place for them too. And so we really want to span various product types to do that. So it's not just about one product type. It's, some of our nodees just want a 2-bed unit for themselves because they want to use the second area for a home office, as an example, and they earn that money, but they want to be part of the community. So that's been really great. And so it is varied, but it's gone really well.
No, I love that your background is in finance because you know all these stats and percentages and numbers right off the top of your head. That's awesome. And I'm sure people watching or listening appreciate that. So thank you. So, you're pretty involved on the regulation and because you're going to these cities and you've started, because you guys started what, in 2016?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you really heavy into like helping with regulation and zoning? Like, are you really involved in that process?
Well, what we really want to do is see the classic residential model absorb these concepts. So a lot of what we've done in our earlier stages is actually take buildings that are already zoned residential, keep them residential, but optimize them for the right bedroom, bathroom counts, or the right sizes, the right amount of amenity space, and do that. And policy will start to follow as people see successful models of living. And so we definitely want to be involved as thought leaders in that forum as we show new models and prove them out.
Cool. No. That makes perfect sense. And then going back to Toronto,
Yep.
one of your homes. So I just read that Sidewalk Labs, the Google project, is done, like canceled. I was so bummed because I always talk about it. They're saying due to COVID, but I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if you followed that project at all.
Of course. No, absolutely. It's a complicated story. I think public-private partnerships, there's a real balance between the private sector and the public sector. And when a group like Alphabet comes in and there's really data protection concerns and there's a desire to come in and rip the playbook on that and rip the playbook on zoning, that's just a hard thing to get through. And so I think, the concept was great, but the execution was a failure. I think also, there's a nuance of doing things in Canada that it's a very fine line. And, I know we all sound similar, Canada, the US, but, they had a big New York team that came in and sort of was like, we're the big guys and you guys don't know what you're doing up there. And I think that rubbed some people the wrong way. So look, I said it on video, but I mean, so I think there was a cultural thing of, how do you go to different cities and markets and not impose your ideas right away? And so I think that can be dangerous if you're coming in and trying to collaborate. Listening to people first before you impose your ideas or kind of collect them, I think is really important. And I think that was a failure of the first team that came in. And they tried to improve that, but it kind of got too late and it got caught in the whole data protection thing. And it's tricky. But that area in Toronto is amazing. We would love to be part of it one day in the next iteration of where the city goes, being born and raised and lived in Toronto part of the year. So we're very excited about that city. As a lot of people might know, it's the fastest growing city in North America. There's huge diversity there. It's becoming a huge tech and innovation hub. So there's a lot of great things happening north of the US border. So we're very excited about that. And we hope, something gets figured out there, but by someone else who takes over that conception of what a master leased community be. I mean, it's a huge space. It's the size of Venice. It's massive.
Whoa, that is large. And the, on expansion plans, and I know you said Seattle, is there any other areas of the world you guys are looking at?
Yeah, we'd love to do more in Western Europe and some of the key gateway cities there. So that's definitely we're eyeing. We're going to continue to expand on the U.S. West Coast, and we'd like to do more in the Toronto area as well. So, West Coast U.S., what they call the GTA area in Canada and Toronto, and, continued in London, Ireland, and a bit in Western Europe will go. And then, as we grow, we would love to do things as we start looking eastward. So, but stay tuned for that.
Oh, good. Okay. And then are there any, so I know we were also on a panel in Berlin, so it's been nice. I've seen you a couple of times live. We were in Zoku when we met in Amsterdam. What are some of your, and that's one of my favorites, obviously, what are some of your favorite concepts, other co-living concepts around the world?
Well, I'm going to answer that differently. I actually, there's some concepts I really like that I would love to see merging together into co-living. And so the vibe of what Soho House does and how it's curated a global community, brought like-minded people together, stayed true to a design aesthetic as well as a cohort of people that they fostered, I really admire. On the other hand, in the hospitality side, we really like what the Hoxton Hotel Group has done. And they've done a similar thing with how they've gone to different cities, embraced the local architecture of that neighborhood, created relationships with local artists and people who are staying there, and again, creating this global community together. So we've enjoyed seeing some of that. And then even on the co-working spaces, companies like Neuhaus who've really tried to take it to the next level, a co-living community that's really high caliber, design led, and forward thinking in how they want their members to really push the envelope. So, my answer is taking something that wraps in some of those concepts into co-living is what we're really excited about trying to do.
Great answer. So everybody watching or listening, look up those 3 brands. Yeah, those are amazing brands. I agree 110%. And I love that you're kind of taking from each and just kind of including that into co-living in just a unique way, right? So speaking about hospitality, a lot of us have talked about these hotels, these distressed hotels, after COVID, like travel's getting killed right now. So what are your thoughts about, co-living operators taking those over?
Yeah, I think there's going to be an opportunity. What it really comes down to is zoning and what people who take those over want to do with those buildings. So if you're going to take a hotel and keep it as a hotel, there's obviously implications financially, tax-wise, property taxes, and what length of stay you can do in a hotel if it stays at a hotel. So then you've got to get into converting hotels into another use class, whether it's a service apartment or even residential. And that's going to really vary city by city, code by code. What are the restrictions? Some cities will let you do it, but then they'll say you need to do parking, right? And that probably doesn't work. And so while there's this blanket overall, okay, there might be an opportunity there, I think the devil's going to be in the details on which hotels can actually be adapted for a long stay co-living model, not a short stay co-living model, because there are co-living operators running a short stay model. Of course, you can take over a hotel, but in some ways they're a hotel operator anyways. But there will be an opportunity maybe for some of them. But if you're trying to do the long stay model, you really have to get into nitty gritty of like, what's the code of these cities? What can you do? And what are the restrictions on that? And that's not always so straightforward.
Oh, no, you're right. And there's ADA requirements here in the States, and you might need to install elevators if they don't have one, depending on the city. So yeah, you'd have to navigate the zoning and and then the taxes, if you keep it a hotel, the hotel tax is crazy. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how that pans out. And then again, speaking of hotels, obviously Marriott, Hyatt, all the big flags, Consolidated, a lot of the little guys. for brand, and they have this great brand consistency. Do you see the same thing happening in the and again, it's really nascent right now, so maybe it's not, maybe we're a few years out, but the roll-ups and the M&A of the smaller co-living operators, do you see the bigger guys maybe doing that eventually?
Well, I think there's different models that you have to look at. So if you're vertically integrated, you don't necessarily need to be high volume to make a business sustainable. There's a lot of apartment owners who only own a small collection of apartments. So there could be vertically integrated co-living owner operators that are small. When you look at the management model, you need a lot of scale in that business. It's a lower margin, higher volume business model. And so there will definitely need to be consolidation in that sector, whether people are merging, buying out, or just certain people are just going for a real expansion on that. But because you do need scale in that model. So I think that's going to happen. And, we talked a little bit about the lease model, and, that's really getting tested in these times. And so there might be opportunities where some of those leases get undone. And then what happens with them, and what's the opportunity there to rethink probably a more sustainable management capital structure on some of those buildings.
No, that's a great point. And it's funny, I just hung up, and maybe I'll bring him on the show, hopefully, but he's on the multifamily side, 15,000 units here in the States. And yeah, I mean, he definitely said that that's a possibility, down the road of that happen, just trying to consolidate it in some sense, which was interesting.
Yeah, well, I definitely think there's going to be opportunity. We're in first inning, right? And
Yeah.
so there's
No,
a lot interesting
yeah.
is going to.
Sorry to interrupt. He said that too. He was like, "Oh, Christine, I'm surprised." He's like, "I haven't seen," because he's been on the investment side and he's dealt with all that, selling big properties and, multifamily. And he's like, "Well, I'm really surprised that there's not been a big co-living operator up for sale yet. We don't have that data." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, again, this industry is so new. Like, I don't think they're going to put their building up for sale quite yet, but, so they just don't see the numbers or the data or, on the exits yet, but it's too early." You haven't heard of any coming up or anything, right?
I think some things are going to come up. There's also management changes happening.
Oh, yeah.
What you're seeing in the industry as it pivots more from a tech-based startup concept into a property ownership management, whether it's asset management or property management or operations. As we pivot our industry more into that, I think you're going to see more real estate professionals at the helm of some of these organizations.
Oh yeah, you're definitely right. Without saying, there's been two already that raised the B round, and the CEO just got switched right out the second they closed the B round again to somebody with more experience. It's great to have the startup founder, but then it's like, okay, let's put the guy with the real estate investment background and let's take it to the next level. So yeah, I think we will see more of that for sure. So what is your favorite part about running a co-living operation globally?
Well, every day's different. It starts with talking to people in Europe. It ends with California. So that's always fun, getting insights real time. And, it's everything from design, ideas on zoning, picking doorknobs, sometimes debating about, colors. I am quite hands-on. We get into all of that, dealing with banks, dealing with capital, dealing with new projects. So it's very varied. But I would say the thing that when I look and say, why are you doing this and what's the most interesting? It's hearing the stories and meeting our residents that's the most interesting. I mean, we've just got so many amazingly talented people, 26 countries, 6 continents. We had a biotech startup CEO live in our building. We had a Grammy Award-winning musician there. We had someone who's doing visual effects for one of the biggest Netflix grossing films this year. We had a creative director from Cirque du Soleil. And we had lots of people from places like Google and, look, human rights lawyers, the whole thing. And so when you put all those people together and meet them and hear their stories and come from all these backgrounds, like that's really fun. And that's really interesting. And we want to really foster that community as we grow. And really, at the end of the day, it's about the people, the connections you make, the connections you help foster them make in their livelihood and their journey. And, we hope our Node alumni, our nodees will, continue to take things. It's not just a living experience with us, but it's sort of a stage in life that they embraced with us. And, they look back fondly on that.
Nodies. I love that you guys call them that. That's amazing. And then what kind of events are you guys hosting?
So it's really varied. Like, of course, there's the traditional, seasonal events that we have, and in this world of virtual events, we've had everything from global virtual pub trivia, which is interesting, to of course, people hanging out, the wine and cheeses, fitness, talking about health and well-being. But the events I find the most interesting are resident-led events, like really us acting as a platform and a facilitator, and a resident putting up their hand. And we had a resident in Brooklyn who was in the Blue Man Group and said, "Hey, who wants to come see the show, come backstage, meet everyone, see how it's really done, and have a sneak peek?" And those are when you get people like that in and they're doing it, like, you just can't put a price on that experience, right? And so those have been really special ones. And then, of course, we want to get more and more involved with the community. And so sometimes there's outreach events with the local community, whether it's volunteering and other things like that. So, we would love to, expand the net that, the Node community is bigger than just the residents. And, a lot of times that's not necessarily an event. But it's just making sure we're supporting local businesses and other organizations right at our doorstep. And whether it's the local coffee shop or art gallery or Pilates studio, that, we're helping them, and we're in this all together as a neighborhood. And so that's where the live local part of our ethos really ties in. And so it's not necessarily an event, but like, how do we embrace and make sure we're supporting each other? Because supporting independent businesses, other creatives right around us, and being part of that ecosystem is really important. And that's really being enjoyed by some of our residents.
No, and you guys convey that 100%, which is cool to see for sure. So I have two more questions. So the first one is, so somebody watching or listening to this, what's one piece of advice you would give either a brand new operator or somebody thinking about getting into co-living?
Oh, that's a great question. Pick your customer and stick to it, and pick your vibe. Pick the ethos you want to have as a culture, either whether it's a location, a neighborhood, a cohort, and really embrace that and make it special, I would say. The other thing I would say is you need to pick your capitalization properly. There's been this whole debate about owning versus doing a lease versus a management model. And there's strengths and opportunities and weaknesses in each of those. And it's super, super important to get that right. Some people get forced into one model because that's their only choice, but that might be the hardest model to scale, even though it's the easiest to get into. So we have some co-living concepts that are very easy to get into, but very hard to keep sustainable over long term. So I think people really need to really think through that when they're making a decision here.
Cool. Do you guys have any ground up development that you've done or will do in the future?
Yeah, we do. We're building what will be the first purpose-built kind of ground up co-living concept, full building in Canada. So we're very excited about that. I'm going to put a shovel in the ground pretty soon. We'll definitely look at opportunities in different markets to do ground up, especially as we look at bigger projects and potentially partnering with best-in-class developers who want us to come in and help curate something with them. So we'll definitely either do it ourselves or partner with developers and investors to do that. But we're also going to look at where can we come and help manage buildings, as long as they stay true to the Node look, style, feel, ethos, community that we can curate. And so we're really excited about what the next chapter of growth. We think there's a huge opportunity in front of us. We grew slowly. We tried to be patient. We went to multiple markets and learned a lot about each of them. And I think we're poised for a really exciting chapter as we get into the second, third, fourth innings of this game.
I don't think you guys grew slowly in 4 years. It's so impressive that you went to so many different countries so fast. But maybe it feels slow to you.
I worked for a firm that would create $10 billion companies in like 4 years. So, it's everything's relative. So
Nice. That's amazing. That's awesome. No, and I'm watching the time, and in my head, I'm like, this might be a 2-hour interview, because I know we could just talk forever, and you're super passionate about co-living, which is awesome to see. And it's impressive that you enjoy the finance side, but also the design side too. That's really a cool mix. You don't see that very often.
I think so.
And then, so my last question is, where do you see co-living as an industry if we fast forward 10 years to the year 2030?
I really think it's a question of, where do we see multifamily as an industry in 10
Okay.
So I imagine buildings where you go in and there's no co-living, there's no multifamily, there's not labels on these. These are community-based residences where you can come in, and if you're on your own and single and your budget's a certain price, we can help arrange, and people can help arrange a roommate for you and match. If you want your own micro apartment, that can happen. If you want your own one bed that's larger, maybe you're a couple or need more space, there's a product there. If you want a live work unit, there's something there. And even if you want an unfurnished unit, but you want to be part of a vibe, like that is the future of urban multifamily. And so co-living is leading the way in curating some of these concepts of, how do we optimize space? How do we better create and curate community? How do we bring people together? How do we get that zeitgeist right? But what I really see this happening is this becomes mainstream, and every apartment has to have the things that we're talking about, because this is the future of housing. Like, who wants to live in a building where you've got to call the cable guy, set up your own Wi-Fi, deal with your bill separately, lug around your furniture, an old mattress around every time you go somewhere, not know your neighbors, not be connected to them? Like that world is over. And so we're just getting started in this. And so I see really in the future, we won't have to call it co-living anymore. This will just be normal. So that's sort of my dream for the sector. And I think within that, then who will be the big players in multifamily? I think we'll have to have embraced some of these concepts to be the brands of the future. If we want to think about like who will be the branded leaders, where it really means something to a resident that they joined your community based on the brand of the ethos you have, and that segmentation of the branding around this whole curated concept of what you're offering. And I think that's really exciting. Like, we haven't seen that bifurcation at all in the residential space, like you see in hospitality, where you have budget, you have 5-star, you have boutiques, you have independents. And I think there could be a great opportunity in 10 years to see all these different concepts at different affordability levels, different sizes, types. And that's going to be really exciting, where someone knows what they're getting because this is what they're looking for at this time. And they know these are the 3 brands that totally fill that lifestyle need for me in these areas. And that's the ones I'm following. And then, so that's what's really exciting for me about where the future is going for all of us.
Yeah, no, and I've already thought of that recently. These moving companies are going to go out of business, right? Because a lot of these places are becoming furnished. So there's no furniture being moved around as much. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, from a global perspective on the furniture thing, most of Asia is furnished. Most of Europe is furnished. I don't know where everyone was sleeping in North America, while I left the last, 15 years. Like, it's normal in London and Hong Kong to expect a furnished apartment. So this whole hang up about, furnishing is like this huge thing. It's like just different markets are catching up to, this phenomenon. But it's going to be mainstream. Most apartments in urban cities will be furnished. Like, no one's going to want to do that. Who wants to do that, anymore?
Yeah. And it'll be fun. Hopefully YouTube is still around in 10 years and we can look back at this, because you're the first person that said that answer about, it's all going to be living. Multifamily is going to have to start building community, furnishing their units. So essentially it just gets kind of merged together, and, whatever label it's going to be called. I think you're exactly right. So it'll be fun. So good answer on that. Let's look back in 10 years in the future.
Well, look, think about it when, internet dating happened, right? Like, at first it was like really alternative, and like everyone's like embarrassed, and you couldn't tell someone you met online, and it was like all hush hush, and it was a bit quirky. And then like over time, it sort of became a little more normal. And look, I'm past that stage of my life, but now it's like, who doesn't, like, it's just normal. Like, oh yeah, why not like go meet someone with a copy that you swiped a certain way and just see how it goes, right? And so this is all gonna move into the mainstream. I mean, this whole resistance is just natural human emotion to change. And just keep in mind, you didn't have to do much to be a successful apartment owner in the last 30 years. You could close your eyes and pretty much do anything, and it was the greatest run of all time. So why innovate when you didn't have to? But I don't think the next 30 years are going to have that same playbook. It's going to be highly competitive. There's more regulations. There's tenants who are going to demand more. And so it's time for everyone to up their game.
Love it. And on that note, we will conclude. I knew this would be a fun interview, Anil. Thank you so much for coming on finally. After me texting you like however many times. I'm like, please come on. Awesome conversation. So thanks again.
Well, really a pleasure and really enjoyed it. So great talking as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much for checking out today's episode. If you want to learn more about co-living, you could check out my book on Amazon, The Co-Living Code. And of course, if you're looking for the perfect software to power your co-living concept, check out kindred.io, KNDRD.io. And another quick thank you for our partner, Anyplace. They make it easy to book a flexible, fully furnished accommodation anywhere around the world, whether it's an apartment, co-living space, or hotel. You can check them out at anyplace.com.